But we bring in Albert Breer, the Monday morning quarterback. Always great to talk to him. And Albert, let me start with our poll question today. Better quarterback signing, Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh, Baker Mayfield back in Tampa.
I mean, I think it's Baker Mayfield because we know Baker Mayfield's going to be the starter. And, I think it's affirmation that the gamble that they took and that Baker took on himself in 2023 was the right one. Russell Wilson is a total dice roll. They set very clear expectations when he came in there for the visit. He had some things that he wanted that he didn't get, and he wound up doubling back to them and signing with them in the end. So I think he wanted to be in Pittsburgh. But this is very much a no risk proposition for the Steelers. If it goes the wrong way, they can pull the plug at any point, and he hasn't been given any assurances of anything. So, this is, I think, for him, a chance to prove that he's changed over the last few years and that he's willing to come in and compete for a starting job. And I think, for the Steelers, it's really time with Kenny Pickett, right? And so this gives you a real chance to have your litmus test with Kenny Pickett. Can he go back and win his job back and show the Steelers that he may still be worth building around long term.
And the Broncos have to pick up the tab, so Pittsburgh didn't give up any draft picks, and they're going to pay him $1.2 million. That's why I like the deal. I think the potential upside in Pittsburgh is greater than the potential upside in Tampa. And that's why I would opt with, it didn't cost you anything. You're going to take a chance with Russ. You got to keep up with the other quarterbacks in your own division. And it just feels like with Mike Tomlin, that defense, can Russ help you win a couple more games where you end up with 11 or 12?
I don't disagree with you on the point that, Tomlin's going to work to get the most out of him. I think Arthur Smith, their new offensive coordinator, will be able to build something that can work for Russell should he win the job. I just think that there's a likelihood, not a likelihood, I would say a good possibility that, we're going into 2025 and the Steelers are looking for a quarterback in the draft.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes. But I think Russ is looking at it and saying, look, I got a chance to get that next contract. It might not be in Pittsburgh, but I get a chance to showcase my talents.
And I think and I've used this example with you before, Dan, but I think what the Buccaneers have done for themselves is they've created themselves some more runway, right? Where it's okay. So could we draft one this year? Yeah, we could draft one. Say Bo Nix or Michael Penix falls to us in the second round and we really like them. Yeah, we can do that. Or we can wait a year or two. And again, I've used this example with you before, but it's Alex Smith in Kansas City. Alex Smith was a really good quarterback for the Chiefs, but he also bought them a lot of time to find Patrick Mahomes. And so this, for the Bucs, I think doesn't just help them right now. It also gives them a few years of runway where they don't have to force it with a young quarterback in the draft. Because as you and I both know, when you start forcing it in the draft, that's how EJ Manuel goes 16th overall. That's how Christian Ponder goes 12th overall, right? The Bucs are in a place now where for the next few years, they don't have to force anything, which is a good place to be when you're looking for a young quarterback. And I mean, who knows? Maybe Baker Mayfield winds up becoming the long-term answer after all.
Okay. I thought that Kirk Cousins was going to be the first domino, and Russ, has moved up ahead of the class. So where's that leave Kirk Cousins? What are his options?
Yeah, Atlanta's very interested. I expect that Atlanta is going to make a very strong push to get him, and they've got great connections to him in that building. Raheem Morris was with Kirk Cousins in Washington in 12, 13, and 14. Zach Robinson, the new offensive coordinator there, was the right-hand man of Kevin O'Connell in Los Angeles before O'Connell became the Minnesota coach. So for Cousins, there's scheme carryover there too. He can step right in and he knows the system that Zach Robinson's going to be putting in. And he's got a really good offensive line in front of him there if he goes there, and Bijan Robinson behind him, and Drake London and Kyle Pitts, and here we go. So I think Kirk's going to have two very good options in front of him. And I will say this. He is the big domino in the quarterback market, regardless of what happened with Mayfield, regardless of what happened with Russell. And the way I look at it, I know it's going to sound weird, but this isn't all about money for him. This is, I think, about someone making a commitment to him being the starting quarterback for the next 2 or 3 years. And when they were negotiating a long-term deal with the Vikings a year ago, the Vikings were unwilling to guarantee money past 2024. And, Kirk took that, and rightfully so, I think, as okay, well, like that means you're not willing to commit to me as your starter more than a year past my existing contract. I think the structure of the contract is going to be just as important as the money here, where if you're Minnesota or Atlanta, it's going to be how far out am I willing to give Kirk the financial assurances that will make him believe that he's going to be our starting quarterback in, say, 2025 or 2026. I think that'll be a deciding factor here. And, obviously Minnesota had drawn a hard line a year ago, and they've communicated to Cousins camp that they're not willing to go where they've gone twice now, which is to 3-year fully guaranteed deals. We'll see how the rest of the day plays out.
He's Albert Breer, the Monday morning quarterback. I'm wondering with the Falcons, if they don't get Kirk Cousins, that he stays in Minnesota, does then open the door, then Justin Fields would go to it.
Yes.
Like what's the mark? Is that what's holding up Justin Fields? What he's going to do?
So like when the Bears were really aggressive in scouting Caleb Williams, right? Like they went like with the All-Star games in January, like Ryan Poles instructed his scouts. Every time you talk to a USC player, every time you talk to an Oklahoma player, every time you talk to a player who's from the Washington, D.C. area, you ask them about Caleb Williams. And they tried to get him in for his 30 visit last week. Now the timing didn't quite work out, but the intention was to get him in last Tuesday for his 30 visit. All of this is an expedited timeline in evaluating a quarterback. They did that because they want to check all the boxes on Caleb, so they'd be they'd be cleared to offload Justin Fields. Now, I think the plan there had been with the idea that there's no better time than right before free agency to offload Justin Fields because that's when the most quarterback openings across the NFL. The problem for them became that some of these veteran quarterbacks, your Kirk Cousins, your Baker Mayfields, your Russell Wilsons, were stopping up the market. And so with those guys coming off the market now, I think the hope is that things will clarify a little bit. I'd expect if the Falcons strike out on Cousins for there to be an interest in Justin Fields. The owner really liked him when they looked at him 3 years ago. The general manager there, Terry Fontenot, same thing. So I think the Falcons will be a suitor. With Pittsburgh off the table, I'm just not sure how many more suitors they're going to be than just Atlanta. So I think my personal opinion is that the Bears might have to compromise from a price tag standpoint a little bit to move him off the roster. And I find the conclusion that I think everybody's been seeking for the last few weeks.
If I told you 2 years ago Mac Jones would be dumped for a 6th-round pick a couple of years later.
I don't know if I would have thought that was that crazy. I will say this, Dan, like they shopped him around last year a little, and this was about the price last year, believe it or not. And I think to me, like, at least this is all about upside, right? Like this is all about like, how can you envision getting the most out of this guy? Like with Justin Fields, say you acquire Justin Fields, there's so much athletic upside there that you can envision something. Like, can you envision him becoming Jalen Hurts down the line? Like, right? Like you can probably close your eyes and envision that. May not be likely, but you can probably close your eyes and envision that, right? What's the upside with Mac Jones?
He had a good rookie year.
And that's the problem, right? Like, but that's the problem is like, it's really hard to take a player like that and say, all right, like, I believe he can be X or Y or Z, who's a great quarterback in the NFL. It's really hard to do that. Now, that doesn't mean he can't be a good quarterback in the league, but even Baker Mayfield, like, Baker's not the most physically gifted player, but I'd say he's, significantly more talented physically than Mac Jones, So that's the problem that the Patriots had. And, they made the decision at the combine, or finalized the decision at the combine. They were going to do this. They went and talked to Mac Jones a week ago, asked him what he wanted, but they, emphasized their intention to move him off the roster. And here's the crazy thing about it. So I believe the Jaguars offered the 6th back on Friday, right? On Saturday, the Patriots shopped that offer across the NFL to see if they could get 5 anywhere, and they couldn't get a 5. And you remember going back a couple of years, right, with San Francisco, how much we thought San Francisco was in on Mac Jones, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The Niners wouldn't do it. The Niners have 11 picks this year, Dan, and they wouldn't beat the 6 that the Jaguars sent off. And you know how these teams sometimes hang on to their draft evaluations. So it's just sort of the way that the league views him. And I'm not saying he can't be a good quarterback in the NFL. Like I think he's got a lot to work with, and I think it's a smart trade for the Jaguars because the Jaguars could be looking at this in 4 months, and there could be a couple of quarterback injuries in some places, and they may be able to flip them for a better pick. You know what I mean? Like, so it could really work out for them that way. But I think the physical limitations limited his market.
Is there a running back who is the person in front with the dominoes that when he goes, that changes everybody?
God, I am so fascinated to see what happens with the running back stand because to me, isn't this a litmus test? You know what I mean? For where the running back position is. Think about this, right? Okay, not a very good draft class. In fact, the best player at that position in the draft class might be the Texas kid who's coming off the torn ACL, Jonathan Brooks, right? So that's number one. So there aren't great answers in the draft this year, at least as it sets up right now. You have a team who played in the Super Bowl who had the highest paid running back in the league on the roster, right? In Christian McCaffrey. So now there's proof that, like, hey, you can win with a running back making $16 million a year. And then you look at the market and it's Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, DeAndre Swift. So there are big names out there. So if it's ever going to happen, this is the year, right? Wouldn't it be?
Yeah.
If you look at like all the market conditions.
Yeah.
And yet I can't find anybody who thinks that more than maybe one or two of these guys is going to get 8 figures, get into the $10 million a year range. I'd say like, you look at the overall makeup of the group and it's like, okay, like, well, what are teams looking for? I think the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield is a big part of it. And that's why I think Saquon's probably the first one, the first domino to fall. Because he does have that versatility. He's not what Christian McCaffrey is in the passing game, but close enough, right? Like where he can offer somebody something in that area on top of what he is as a runner. But think about this. He's going into his 7th year. I mean, like how much can you gamble on a running back at that age, So I like I said, I'm fascinated to see the way this plays out because I think there are so many things that's set up for this to be the right year for someone to pay a running back, and yet there's a lot of doubt that it's actually going to happen.
Always great to talk to you. I know you're busy this week. Thanks for joining us, Albert.
All right, thanks, Dan.
That's Albert Breer, the Monday morning quarterback. I've been saying all along that when the Giants decided that they weren't going to tender an offer for Saquon Barkley, that it felt like he was going to go to the Cowboys. Now I get the feeling that even though he would be better for the Cowboys in the run and passing game, that the Cowboys will look at Derrick Henry. Love Derrick Henry as a player, as a person, but that makes me a little bit nervous that you have Derrick Henry. What's he going to cost you? Can he help Dak Prescott? But it feels like, and Dallas doesn't have a lot of money to play with here. Now, I know Jerry says he's all in this offseason, but I don't know how all in you could be and try to keep everybody, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, Dak Prescott, happy and improve your roster here.